New York City, I am a firm advocate for that you should try to take some public transit while you're here. First of all, it's usually going to be the cheapest and best way to get around New York City, but also it's going to give you a little bit more of a look at what it's like to be here as a local. This is how most locals get around, is via public transit. When people think public transit in New York, people automatically just think the New York City subway, and yes, that is how the majority of New Yorkers get around. If you're visiting New York City, I definitely think you should check out the New York City Ferry. This is something I recommend for a lot of people who come and take our Brooklyn Bridge, Brooklyn Heights Dumbo tour as a way of getting back to Manhattan at the end of the tour. We finished that tour just a few blocks away from here. It's about a 5-minute walk. So let's do a little walkthrough of how to take the ferry. So there are multiple ferry piers in New York City, but we're at the Dumbo Fulton Ferry Pier. So come over to these ticketing machines. I'm gonna press this. I'm just gonna get a one-way ticket because I'm just going right across the river. So one, I'm gonna hit pay, and then you can pay. So one of the questions we get is, can you just use a Metro card? Unfortunately, no. The subways and the buses where you use the Metro card are run by an organization called the MTA, and that is an organization that's run by New York State. The ferries are run by New York City, so it is a different operating system, it is a different ticketing system. So you will actually have to get a separate ticket, but the good news is the pricing's not very different. It is a little bit more than the subway, but not significantly. It's $4 to get this ticket. So you get your ticket, and then we'll be ready to board the ferry here in just a few minutes. So if you come down here to Fulton Ferry Landing where we are, and you have a little bit of time before your ferry is leaving, there's actually a few cool things to look at here on the ferry pier. There is a ferry pulled up, it's not ours. That's another good thing to know. There are a few different lines of the ferry, so don't assume whatever's sitting here is the one that's going across to Pier 11 at Wall Street where we're going. Make sure you check. There's always somebody standing there boarding the ferry though. But there's some really cool things to look at. Over here, there's all these plaques set into the ground. This is showing the first ferry master. That's what ferries used to look like going across the East River. A little different than what we're gonna get on today. A really big turning point for both New York and Brooklyn was the launch of what was called the Fulton Ferry Company. And that was regularly running steamship ferry service between the cities of New York and Brooklyn, opening up the option of commuting back and forth between the two. That's part of how Brooklyn really started to grow. So here's a look at what all of this would have looked like with that ferry service running. So this is 1847. And you can see an absolutely bustling Fulton Ferry landing. By the 1850s, there were thousands of commuters that were traveling across from Brooklyn every single day to go into New York City to go to work. There's also some just really spectacular scenery. If you're here at this ferry pier, you get these beautiful sweeping views of lower Manhattan. You can see the beautiful arch of the Brooklyn Bridge going across the river. So it is absolutely worth it just to come down here and take some pictures, whether or not you're getting on a ferry at all. Something else that you'll see is some lettering along the railings here. So right here in this neighborhood, there was a newspaper called the Brooklyn Eagle. The Brooklyn Eagle was the biggest of the Brooklyn newspapers, and it was in print circulation for a very long time, had a lot of different editors throughout its time. But in the 1850s, their editor-in-chief was Walt Whitman. This was before he went on to become one of the most famous American poets of his time. Walt Whitman wrote a poem called Crossing Brooklyn Ferry. It was actually describing taking that commuter ferry trip across the East River here at sunset. So that's what this lettering is. As a nod to Walt Whitman, this is an excerpt from Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, that poem. So you can give this a read before you get on the ferry. Think about it while you're going across the river. But it's probably time for us to go ahead and line up. minutes later, I'm over here at Pier 11 and I'm right by Wall Street. So honestly, about the same amount of time that it would take you hopping on a subway over there on the other side of the river in Brooklyn. Definitely had a lot nicer scenery coming across this way. So I really encourage you to check out taking one of the NYC ferries. As you can see from this schedule here, they actually have a variety of lines. They go a lot of different places. So if you're looking to explore some other parts of New York City, the ferry might be a great way to do it. So